You know how they say that generals always fight the last war? And that's what they're doing now. This isn't going to be a war, of tanks on battlefields. It's going to be guerrilla war. And you're going to see more and more of outrage against the rich. We wrote in the Trends Journal in this issue about, we were comparing, what Marx had written about in the over 100 and something years ago, and we wrote this line: he would have been laughed out of the history books if he would have ever suggested, because they were talking about the bourgeoisie, the dictators. And the autocrats, he would have been laughed out of the history books if he could have ever imagined that the people would have been forced to bail out the Rothschilds. And that's what we're being forced right now. We have these money junkies out there that keep telling us that if they fail, we go down with them. And look at this guy Corzine. I love it. It's the perfect one. That company that just folded. What was it, MP Global? Is that the initials for it?
$2 billion they lost.
Yeah. What did he bet on? He bet on European bonds. And this is another Goldman Sachs guy, right? That he was also the governor of New Jersey and senator of New Jersey. Oh yeah, brilliant cat. I mean, look at that, And what did he get as a going away present? $12 million. You think
Gerald,
it makes people angry?
Yeah, Gerald, I need a quick answer because we're running out of time here for this last 2 points. What do you see happening as far as the euro? What do you see happening as far as gold and silver and the dollar in the next 12 to 24 months?
We're forecasting gold 2,000. It's all I own is gold and silver, about 90% gold, 10% silver. And I have silver because I'm concerned that they're going to regulate the supply and sale of gold at some point, as they've done before. They did it in 1933, the Federal Emergency Banking Act, and they're going to blame the decline of the dollar and all of these fiat currencies on gold speculators.
Hold your thoughts 1 second. My guest is Gerald Celente, Celente. The website is trendresearch.com. He publishes the Trend Journal. We're going to say goodbye to those who are listening over a terrestrial land-based station. You can continue listening for the next 5 minutes to this over progressiveradionetwork.com. Gerald, let's take a look at 3 things. We don't live in a cocoon. I'm already talking with people in this around the world about moving back towards shared communities or sustainable communities, homesteads, and I've made a map. It's up on the website, the best places in the world. It's an original. We did it all from scratch, and we looked at everything: crime rates, progressive communities, water, soil, away from nuke, away from hydrofracking, far enough away from a city that you're not going to be affected when the lights could go out in the solar storms that are coming. And on the one side of the solar storm issue is they're definitely coming. That's not in dispute. All astrophysicists say that. It's how bad will they be. If it's the Carrington effect, the worst that we saw in the 1800s, virtually every one of the Northeast, Midwest, and Northwest power grids will burn out. Not just break, as their lines are now, but burn out, which the only replacement parts are in China and India, and there's no way to get that information and get it here, because they're also in the Northern Hemisphere, and they're also going to have their cities fried as well. So I'm looking at what could be, on the worst scale, massive destruction because of the nuclear power plants. After a week of being on a backup generator, they're out of electricity and they have no surge protectors. They have not had a rewiring to keep the electric in the plant, so you can keep the 2.5 billion gallons of water per day coming in to cool the spent fuel rods. And you got 2 of them. That's 5 billion just on the Hudson at Indian Point. So we're looking at all this, and I'm saying you better start planning now. If it doesn't happen, you're no worse off. If it does happen, it literally could mean survival. But let's say the nuclear power plants get surge protectors, 104 of them, and rewire themselves. Unlikely, but let's say it's possible. You're still dealing with a society that's not going to be having any water, electricity, or food. And imagine then what could be going on. Give us your projections of what's going to happen quickly in with the euro, with Ireland in particular, because Ireland's way ahead of Greece as far as education, standard of living, achievements in the current sense, and it's quiet right now, but I believe it's a quiet that you've got to understand the Irish people. Don't be misled by the fact that you're not seeing riots in the street or protests, that they're not ready to move in a particular direction. And then in the United States, give us your overview, please.
Well, the euro, I see it collapsing. And a matter of fact, a telling line that was in the Financial Times, and it was Berlusconi came out and said what a joke the euro was, and then of course he retracted it immediately. But here's the line. As a matter of fact, I saved it. In Italy, Mr. Berlusconi insisted there was no credible alternative to his government, of course not, and called the euro, quote, a strange currency that has not convinced anyone. Now remember, this is coming from, the head of one of the largest economies in the world. A strange currency that has not convinced anyone. And then they write this, though he later issued a statement to clarify his support for the euro. That's why they call them prostitutes, because they write that. They clarified his statement. The euro is going to go the way of all of the fiat currencies in countries that overextended and has taken on debt that they can no longer pay off. And we see it declining, and we see a time of that we said when the beginning of the European Monetary Union began, that it was being fashioned at a time of great hopes for globalization. Remember, China, they weren't doing business in the late 1980s. So by the late 1990s, globalization was really catching on when the euro came on. And remember, most of up until, again, 1990, early 90s, everything east of the Berlin Wall was behind the Iron Curtain. So there was this great euphoria of globalization. So the euro looked good under those conditions. And so we don't see it sustaining. As to what could happen, the systems are going to break down at some point. You were just talking about the outages that are still going on in Connecticut. And these are under good conditions, and look how long it's taking to repair them. If there's a nuclear disaster, a Fukushima-level disaster, or even less than that, there'll be massive chaos everywhere. I have Gerald Celente's GC's 3Gs, guns, gold, and a getaway plan. And as you pointed out, prepare for the worst. If the worst doesn't happen, you lost nothing by preparing. But if the worst happens and you're not prepared, you lose everything. And I really believe we're in that critical time right now. This thing could go either way at any time, whether it's a Carrington effect or a moronic effect from people that call themselves politicians, that are sociopaths and psychopaths that want to start war. So in any event, we're going into a winter of discontent, and people should prepare for it.
A final thought here. I believe that the smart European bankers and money managers are fully aware that if they're in that insider's loop with the Federal Reserve, that even if they lose bets, they will be bailed out, as $16 trillion was given to these same people in the United States and Europe, banks, corporations, and even governments, by the Fed in secret. It was only Bernie Sanders who allowed us to know this. Now, I bet that they're looking at about $6 trillion over there right now that is susceptible. And I believe that the Fed will back these people up and bail them out. I just believe that the smart ones are betting on this because they know that they'll be helped. I want your thoughts on the Federal Reserve, and where do you see the dollar going in the United States over the next 24 months?
I agree with you on the Federal Reserve. They're going to do something. And the European central banks are going to print money, too. They call it buying bonds, which they weren't supposed to ever do. And that's what Trichet said they would never do, and they did it. So they're just going to keep the Ponzi scheme going. In the meantime, it devalues their currency. And as we all know, Ponzi schemes come to an end. When will they come to an end? I don't know. And what happens with the dollar? Well, you can see the seesaw that it keeps taking. The euro goes up, the dollar goes down, the dollar goes down, the euro goes up. But it's really jumping out of the Titanic and going, or from the Lusitania into the Titanic, because both of them are going to go down. They're both going, but it's not being shown so much in inflation, although there is inflation, but they're cooking the numbers. What it is a devaluation of the currency. So, for example, the the price of the commodity doesn't necessarily rise. It just takes more of your dollars to buy them. The net effect, of course, is still inflation, but in a very different way. So I don't know where the dollar's going to go. However, having said that, again, my money is, and I'm only speaking for myself, my money, I don't give financial advice, my money is totally in gold and silver. I do not trust these paper currencies.
I'm glad, and I'm hopeful that people in the next 12 months to 24 months will realize, work with other people, share quality assets, and look at making a more sustainable, healthy life in a more rural environment, close enough to a major city that is sustainable, but far enough away from nuclear, hydrofracking, and what could very possibly be a social anarchy at some levels. And if you're not rich enough to live in one of those protected green zones where the security, private armed forces will be, then you could have a lot of trouble facing you. So, Gerald, I think we're on the same page with those issues. Let's hope that it seeps into people's consciousness where they actually move. I mean, people were calling, and Elizabeth said, can we give bulk items like beans and grains, of which there are about 60 varieties, in 25, 50-pound bags to people at cost? And I said, sure you can, as long as they come pick it up. And at the 89th and Broadway, 7 days a week, they come in there from the morning till night and do that. But I'm only doing this once because a lot of people right now, I mean, after the hurricane where they had flooding and no fuel and no food, and now after this, how many times you got to have a wake-up call before you realize, what if a big one happened where you could be months without food or water and you don't even have an emergency home kit, you have no flashlights, you have no bikes, you have nothing. And I'm afraid that most people are going to wait until something really like a Katrina happens, then they'll get their attention. Until that time, they won't. And those who read Trends Journal can see what's coming at them. So, Gerald Celente, thank you very much for all your good work. We look forward to our next conversation.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Gary.
Gerald Celente, Trends Journal. It's at trendsresearch.com. Sorry that I've gone over in this program by 5 minutes to the next host. I look forward to sharing more tomorrow. Have a nice day, everyone.